Hey TV fans, Bored now, back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Fatal Attraction Season 1 Episode 4. The episode is called Beautiful Mosaics. Full spoilers from the start of this review as always. This is a really solid episode, very tight episode. I liked quite a bit of what it was doing. I think this may be my favourite episode so far. So, a bit like the last episode was from Alex's point of view, this one is from Beth's point of view. So we start to see her during the time of the affair starting, and we start to see a bit more about their family life, get to know that. It crucially shows that they were quite a happy family. It opens up the Beth character for sure. We get to see more of her personality, more of her interactions with different friends and families. We see that she is a good mother and that she's close to her parents. Also her work colleague, who's the one who then in the future she's now with. They're married or they're together at the very least. So we get a bit more of a background on that because in the past he's married but his wife has got an illness, so I'm assuming the wife probably dies. But it's a strong episode anyway. We also see Dan in the present trying to get job interviews, trying to get roles, and how tough that is, and it's a chance for him to go around some of the people he was close to and the people he knew at the law firm. The weakest scene is probably the opening scene, and that's the daughter in therapy once again. So that's Ellen in therapy, and I think I've decided that the actress just isn't the best, and that's partly why that scene is pretty weak, because she's going back over some emotional stuff about her being only like 8 or 9 when the whole affair was going down, and how she's now seeing the dad for the first time in like, well, since then, in like over 10 years. So having to deal with that, the therapist is trying to help her through it, and it's through that then we enter this flashback and this script which the therapist is reading. So there is a good scene actually with the daughter, and that's the scene with her and her teacher, and he's giving her a lesson and saying that you're starting to get behind and you're really struggling. You don't seem prepared for the final bit of work, the final essay or exam, and says really you should start planning now. And that's when she just comes out with what's been happening in her life. She just sort of blurts it out, and he is obviously taken aback and very supportive, offers her an extension, but she says, no, it's cool, I think I'll be fine. And it's just a nice little scene. It's a well done scene, and it makes you like the teacher. He's actually very supportive of her, but it just feels quite a cathartic scene for the daughter to just get that out in the open like that with the teacher, like an adult she can trust. So I'll talk about the Beth stuff in the episode and what we see mostly through the flashbacks, because as I said, it is during happier times. It's around, we see the family selling the house, and we see that the scene where Alex is in the house and visiting, which we saw in the last episode, is actually this open house, because Beth is putting up the old house for sale and Alex pretends that she's an interested customer, interested in buying it. So they start talking about how Beth says, like, my best experiences have happened in this house, and that just kind of sells it. Then Alex is like, yeah, sees herself as taking over Beth's life with her husband. And then we get the point where Danny comes home, and of course it was Alex who let off the acid in his car the previous episode. So Mike is giving him a pep talk once again, and like he's saying, you've just got to ignore her, because clearly telling her to go away isn't working. And Mike is once again great in this episode. He steals the scenes. He has some great chemistry, the actor Toby Hoss, with pretty much everyone, including with the L character, which I'll get to in a minute. But that scene nicely transitions to a scene where he's giving Dan a pep talk in the present because of Dan looking for work, and we get a hint at Dan's past and his privilege, because he says he's never had a job interview before, because when he got to the law firm it was because his dad owned it, and he just gave him a leg up, and that was it. He didn't really have to go looking for jobs and job interviews. So this is new to him, and he's starting to see how tough it is. But Mike's giving him this pep talk about how lawyers just love this shit, and you've just got to go out and get it. And we just see his various levels of success, because he's interviewed by Frank at one point, and Frank, as we know, is a bit of a douchebag, and him and Dan have a past. And as Mike points out when he comes out, Frank just called him in. He never had any intention of hiring him. He called in just to throw it in his face. But we see the contrasting reactions to Dan in the present from his various former work colleagues and people he's known. So, for example, Jorge, who now is partner in the law firm, he gives Dan a job out of nowhere. They bump into each other and he gives Dan a job, and that's it. He's giving him the benefit of the doubt, and that's it. Whereas by contrast, L still doesn't like Dan. He still doesn't trust him. He believes that he did do the murder, even though they're insisting he's not. And that's where we get that entertaining scene with Mike, where he approaches him, and it's kind of saying, you know, because we find out that L was a big factor in the testimony in putting Dan away originally, and Mike tries to convince him to give him the benefit of the doubt, and saying he may be many things, but he's not a killer. And L points out, well, he's a liar, so really we don't know what he's capable of, which is a good point. But this is the scene I'm talking about, a really sparky scene between Al and Dan, because like Toby Hoss just seems to have chemistry with everyone, and you get this sort of banter where you get the sense there's begrudging respect even though tensions are high. And he's just got that line because he's doing like his garden about like his cucumbers, offering them cucumber, and then he's like, he goes to Mike, you can have a beer and shut the fuck up. and then he's like, a minute ago you offered me one of your cucumbers. He's like, I ain't giving you any of my fucking cucumbers. So I just love that shit. But Mike and Dan slowly get more potential dirt on Alex. So they interview Paul in prison, who was like Alex's friend, who was in the building opposite her, and we saw there was some tension where she accused him of like ignoring her phone calls. And so they find out a couple of bits from him. They find out then he was involved in drugs, a drug dealer, and he lived across the hall from Alex, and so that's probably what Alex was threatening with, telling the authorities, because she said, you know, for a criminal I can be like bad, but for a friend I can be like good. So the line from last week, I think it was, or last episode. And they also find out then she was acting weird around him, like she was mocking him, she was doing an impression of his voice, and then just laughing, and also just mocking like his Ryan style. So just once again painting the picture of Alex being erratic, where Paul says for years they were close friends, and then she just started to act differently, and when he called her out on it, she just then got mad at him and said he was delusional. The other thing is then at one point Dan meets with his ex-boss, and she is really critical of him. She's critical about the way they went after Alex in court and the whole legal defense, and she makes some good point actually, because she starts saying, like, if you can't fight the facts of the case, if you can't win legally, then you just go after the victim. It's victim blaming. So she's making that point. Then it really must have taken a lot for someone to have like killed her or something like that. So to actually go after a victim who has been dead, regardless of the facts, is pretty low. And she definitely makes a compelling point in the scene. Like, she's clearly pissed with Dan, but she does give him a juicy nugget. She tells him then there was a complaint against Alex by this bailiff who she pursued and rejected her, and like, she doesn't outright say that she stalked him when he rejected her, but then there was a bit of a thing where she was like maybe too persistent, and so she gives Dan the name and basically tells him to get the hell out. So there are a couple of bits of evidence or potential evidence that they are building as a bit of a profile, a bit of a history with Alex. So just going back to the Beth stuff, because there's some good stuff with her in the episode. A couple of other bits is that she starts seeing evidence around the house that makes us start to question if Dan is having an affair. One is that she finds the earring, that being Alex's earring, in the dog poop basically. And there's this big like end of the episode where this is nicely set up and you wonder where it's going, but it's well set up and well paid off, because there's a bit where after the dog has got out and stuff, the dog, so Quincy the dog, delightful name, Quincy, fitting considering her husband's a lawyer, that's probably how it got named. But after that, Beth is telling her mother, played by Jessica Harper, to make sure the dog is in the yard before she shuts the gate. And she's going through this, and there's a bit of a joke because like the mother makes a gag about how doing everything the opposite almost, and so it's pretty funny, but you get the impression then the mother maybe doesn't have the best mental facilities at this point. But the setup is then later on Beth can't find the dog, so she frantically starts looking for it in the yard. And what I like about this team is it's as a version, because of course in the film the rabbit shows up dead, so it's definitely playing with that, making you think then the dog's gonna show up dead, but as it happens it's the mother, it's the dog's fine, and so she thinks the dog's in the swimming pool because she can see like an object moving about, and so she runs to it and she realizes it's the mother. She dives in, like fishes her out, and then the dog appears from nowhere like barking, and she finds out later the dog was in the neighbour's yard. So she starts questioning why her mother would like close the gate if the dog wasn't there, and Dan says, well, or maybe she thought she knew where he was, that kind of thing. So but it clicks with Dan, and then this is something Alex has done. So It's a clever scene. It's a clever payoff. I like the way it was set up earlier with that weird, like, odd little scene, and you're thinking, well, this is going to come back somehow, and then the way it came back was pretty nice, pretty nicely done, I thought. Also, Mike confronts Alex near the end of the episode, and he's like, he does it casually, like he tries to win her over, and he says to her that Dan's gonna back off to try and like lower her defenses, and he then questions if Beth should be worried, like if she's gonna tell Beth about the affair, and then she says, I don't need to, and before she goes in. So, and then we end with with Dan going to Beth and saying, I need to tell you something, and that's the way the episode ends. So it's obviously implying he's going to tell her about the affair, but with this being TV and that being a cliffhanger, it's possible he might not tell her after all. But it's just nicely teed up, because in the previous scene, like, Alex is like, yeah, I won't need to, so it's almost like intuitively she thinks Dan's gonna be the one to tell her, maybe. So I thought this was a really nice episode, nicely put together. I appreciated the extra time we've got with Beth. I think she shined nicely in the episode, and some decent juicy nuggets about the case and the stuff with Alex too, and I enjoyed Mike and that scene with Al as well. So that's dangerously Fatal Attraction for the week's episode 4. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.